May the meditations of our hearts and all of our words, especially those spoken in this sermon, faithfully point toward the presence of God in our lives. Amen. Some of you have heard me say before that I love Lent. It's one of my favorite seasons. And the reason it's my favorite season is because I learned early on as a teenager that I am someone that needs to be reminded that God is God and I am merely human. I need Lent to remind me that my job is to make space for God in my life and to faithfully and in a disciplined way study and serve the story of Christ in this world. I don't need to be responsible for everything. I don't need to think that I can figure it all out. And every year when Lent rolls around, it helps me put myself back in the right place and remind me of that. And one of the things that I've learned along the way is very present but easy to miss in today's gospel. The gospel for today is John 11, 1 through 45. It's the story of Jesus receiving word that his friend Lazarus is dying. But instead of rushing off immediately, he finishes what he's doing and then goes to Lazarus' house. He first encounters his sister Martha, who says, "Lord, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died, but I'm confident it'll all be okay now that you are here." And then they go and they encounter Mary, his other sister, the woman who had anointed Jesus and wiped his feet with her hair. And she too says, "If you had been here, he would not have died." I think it is too easy in our sanitized modern day reading of the gospel to hear these statements by these sisters as just observations. But instead, I believe that they are more faithfully read as anger. "Lord, if you had been here, he wouldn't have died. How dare you wait? Or you could have solved my heartache and you didn't. If you had been here, he wouldn't have died." Now, the story goes on and Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead, and it is considered one of the great miracles, a sign of Christ's power and connection to God. But in this time in which we are self-distancing and quarantining and wondering what's happening in our world, I think the key for us is to focus on those statements by Lazarus' sisters. To let them be filled with anger and angst. "God, you could have fixed this. Why didn't you? Jesus, how dare you let me suffer in this way?" And exactly as Jesus handles the anger of these women in this story, I have learned that God can handle our anger. I think one of the most dangerous things for Christianity is an idea that there's a way to be a good Christian. And good Christians aren't angry. They don't get mad at God. They seek to understand how God will work it all out in the long run. When I believe the truth of the world and the truth of faith, is that God does not need us to edit our feelings and protect God from something. No, God needs us to remind ourselves that we are merely human, and God expects us to bring all of ourselves into the relationship we have with God. Which means the days in which we're joyful and we can see the glory of creation, but it also means the days in which we're angry and we feel bereft and we feel abandoned. God expects and desires us to bring that into our relationship with Him too. And so in this time in which it is so difficult to know what to do, and at least for me, my feelings and responses change from day to day. I hope that you will trust God enough to be God. And in that trust, offer to God all that you are and all that you're feeling. And in that process of sharing all of your life and experiences with God, that you might become closer to God in this time. Because God is holding you close. May this week be a week in which you allow yourselves to share with God all of your feelings, even when they are angry and ugly and hard to cope with. And may this week be a time in which you watch for little ways that you can be in closer relationship with God and serve each other, so that we might all know that we are contributing to God's work and bringing about God's reign in the midst of this crisis. Amen.